when they have a hearing, congressional hearing in US, one of the people in the room was, I think, government from Nevada. And if you know Nevada, it's where the Las Vegas is. You're from US. What they do in Las Vegas?
Mainly gambling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when this guy from Las Vegas heard that they compared this to gambling, he was very offended. You know why he was offended? He said, when you go to Las Vegas and you gamble, you know odds are against you. Here, you have no idea what's going on. So he is the government on the state that runs gambling. And he said, this is the worst. At least what we do, you know. It's against you. Here, you have no idea what's going on. So imagine if somebody like that tells these bankers, what you're doing is worse than what I'm doing. And I'm living off gambling. What did we make out of this business? Okay. Now also, when we're talking about Islamic finance, we say what we want then. It's not just prohibitions. And you will see muamalat in general deals with prohibition. What we want, as a matter of fact, is to encourage entrepreneurship, mutual cooperation, generosity, and spirit of partnership. And through that, we connect capital owners with real economic activities. There's nothing real about this transaction. Just some people sitting in a room, shifting money around, shifting that around, charging each other fees. And imagine the guy is making 100 million. 100 million a year. How do you do that? What exactly did you do here to add any value in economy? Nothing. So encouraging real economic activity that will actually contribute to the welfare of society via commerce, manufacturing, construction, services, building real stuff. The Prophet ﷺ was once asked, what is the best type of a game? What sort of best profit you can make? And he said ﷺ, that the best is whatever you do with your own hands and every legitimate sale. And the scholars have discussion about what is the thing you do with your own hands. So some say it's a manufacturing, agriculture, this sort of thing. But when you put it all together, you see as a result of it, it's something that is tangible. Whether you run a factory, you do something, the result of it is something real. And then, of course, every legitimate sale, because this product that you have just built with your own hand, that is real in nature, must be sold to make a benefit. And this is what completes that cycle of entrepreneurship. Because you can have a best product, but if it's not selling, you know, it doesn't make sense. As they say, building the mousetrap is still a great skill. You know, you need to have a skill to make it, but selling it is another story. So we want this entrepreneurship that will actually connect capital and real benefits that people have. Yep.
How do you explain entrepreneurship? What is its actual meaning?
All right. Entrepreneurship, meaning of entrepreneurship, there are all of these fancy words that come when you think. The way entrepreneurship works is usually it's connected to people who start something. Okay? They start a business. And it is usually successful business. Many people start stuff, but you have to make it commercially viable. Okay? So entrepreneurs are really visionaries, like leaders, who start businesses and are able to mobilize resources, whether it's financial, human resources, some skills, and they have this drive, like what you see in the companions. They were very entrepreneurial. They were not afraid to start, to do. As you will see Abdurrahman ibn Auf when he came to Medina, and we will talk about that a little bit later. He said, show me the market, you know. And he wanted to take on these challenges, and that's why we're going to study this mindset, which is very critical for Islamic finance, to have that leadership vision, you know. And we know, as a shepherd, for example, one of the, my sheikh explained to me, when we say everyone is shepherd and responsible, you see, one of the functions of the shepherd is to recognize opportunity far, because he has advantage over the, you know, the flock. He can see the green on the horizon, so he can see them. Now, to lead them, you know, you usually have a couple of functions that he would do. One is to take care of the weak, gather those who are lost. But one of the most important one is eventually to lead the strong ones and those others in that direction. So to provide a direction, to provide whatever is needed. So when you talk about business, using these different opportunities and understanding to capture. And that is very critical because the benefit flows enormously in the society. From few people, look at any business that started as a small and now grow big. For instance, Rajihi Bank. Sheikh Rajihi started as a very young man just buying and selling currencies. He didn't have much complicated idea on a bank. You know, Rajihi Bank is one of the biggest bank in the Muslim world. So he started this very simple operation. His box now, where he was trading currencies, is still in the museum, you can see it. Okay? So he started very simple. Then he started building the business. And today it became one of the largest bank in Muslim world. His personal wealth went from $0 to $7.7 billion. And he's now 80s. He donated everything. All of the wealth he gave it to the children and waqf as a charity. Okay? He gave it all up. Now, usually when I talk about this thing, what is important to note is that he's still active as ever. So he still works. He opened the poultry farms, organic farming, you know, all of these things. So you see, that is entrepreneur. He employed thousands of people, solved problems, huge. Riba, I mean, it's a war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Huge problem. So he's solving the problem for people. And this is entrepreneurship. This is what we're talking about. You know, this is what we want to see from people. When we go and take a risk, you know, have a skin, what they say, skin in the game. I take some risk, I go into business, I do things, and I learn from that. So inshallah, after the break, we are going to continue about some of these key principles of Islamic finance.
Although Christianity doesn't have a single credible source to justify her claims of the crucifixion, she yet continues to propagate her myth. They do this by hiding many of their deceptions behind cleverly designed doctrines. Did you know that Christianity stands or falls at the cross? So how did they do this? Join me for this series called The Cross Question.
Probe the past that proves Christianity in practice is fictitious in The Cross Questioned. Every Monday at 11:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 12:30 p.m. India on Peace TV.
Say indeed my prayer, my sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah, sustainer of the world.
A dynamic.
I challenge any human being to point out a single fundamental of Islam
In youthful quest.
which is against humanity as a whole.
Iconic, inspiring, encouraging.
Don't judge Islam based on the following.
Farik Naik.
Judge Islam based on the authentic sources, that's the glorious Quran and the authentic Hadith.
Son of the world-famous orator on Islam and comparative religion, Dr. Zakir Naik.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us an opportunity to do a prophet job and to earn a prophet reward.
A star above par in Teens Star. Tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 9:30 a.m. India on Peace TV.
Jinns, what are they? Where do they live? And what are the differences between shaitan and jinn? Can they see us? Can they harm us? Can they marry us? And how can we protect ourselves from them? Explore the world of jinn with me, Saeed Rage, only on Peace TV.
Join Saeed Raje in the world of jinn with reference to the glorious Quran and the authentic Hadith. Next on Peace TV.
Welcome back. We are talking about Islamic finance, and join me with my friends when we're discussing these principles of Islam as they relate to the wealth and finance and so on. In this part, we're going to discuss a little bit about some of the key principles of Islamic finance. So, number one, most of people know is that interest or riba is prohibited. That is one of the key principles, and in one of our later lectures we will go much more deeply discussing this issue. Also, gharar as uncertainty or speculation is another key prohibitions that we see in Islam. After that, any kind of asset class that is related to things that are in itself haram, like gambling or alcohol, we'll see it is prohibited. After that, because this is trade-based finance, as we will see that it is different from riba because it involves underlying assets. And lastly, we want to have banks and financial institutions to share some of this risk, because the reality is that you shouldn't be getting something for nothing. If you are divorced from the risk, as you can see in our case, the reason why these banks were able to make so huge profit and destroy our economy is because they were removed from the risk. Underlying risk was not there. There were no assets. They were gambling. There was riba involved. So every key principle here and more, selling what you don't have, okay, and so on, was existing here. And it still exists in the industry. So nothing changed as a result of global financial crisis. It's still the same thing. Still can happen. And it's still continuing to happen. Yes, we have a little bit, better situation here and there, and Europe is maybe doing a little bit better. Central bank is stimulating now. Okay, but the causes that led to this are still there. So these are some of the key principles. We will look at them in details, what they mean. Okay, now, somebody might say, give us a break. You're telling us something, these principles, hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they can be actually commercially viable. We can run a business now. This is economy. This is a complex. You see how complex things we have? We have these things. We have Twitter, and how can Islamic finance work with the internet and all of these cool stuff, iPhones? And that's something for the old age. We say, okay, that is a question that many people have in their mind. Will it work? Okay, and sometimes, until people see it with their own eyes, like we saw in Medina, how when Muslims established the state and the system, many more people were recognizing what it is. So unlike in Mecca, if you see, it was only a handful of Muslims, because this takes huge intellect, very special purpose to recognize something as an idea in its infancy. So, and usually these are the best in your society. Those who can recognize idea when it is just having a small shape of what is to come. These are the best. But for majority of the people, what they need to do, they will believe it when it see it. Okay, and that's how it is. So what is currently Islamic finance? First of all, it started actually in Egypt. Today's Islamic finance in 60s. However, this operation were not commercially viable. So they were based on good intention, but sometimes you have to have commercial sense into it, because after all, it's a business. It must be run as a business with a profit and all of these things, as you would expect. Like the other day we were discussing how you like to cook the food. Cooking food, just having halal ingredients, it's not going to make your restaurant work well, isn't it? It's not enough. It probably takes some more skills and the way you prepare food to be attractive, to be a business now. Okay, so it's the same here. Just having Sharia compliant contracts and the way you execute your operation does not necessarily translate in successful bank. So it was only in 70s when Dubai Islamic Bank and Islamic Development Bank started these operations that were more and more in line with Sharia, but also commercially viable. So things started happening. We have seen many other players coming in. In fact, in 1999, We have seen Dow Jones Islamic market launch their index. We have seen hundreds of new organizations and thousands started offering Islamic finance products. Even the magazines like The Banker, they track 500 top institutions. And in 2011, we have seen consortium of Islamic banks starting first international Islamic interbank rate, which is to replace what is known as LIBOR, which is London benchmark for conventional banks. So these are the huge development that we are seeing. And in fact, today, Islamic finance is one of the fastest growing segment of the finance industry. It's the fastest growing segment and growing between 10, 15, up to 20% per annum. Now, it is estimated that it is now worth 1.4 trillion. 1.4 trillion, it's 1,400 billion, okay? Now, is that a big number? I mean, if you had that much money in your pocket, it would be big, I know that, but on a scale like
On a scale.
global scale,
No, it's not. It's not.
in fact, when you think about it, Muslims are 25-6% of the world population, and this is 1% of the finance.
But no, it's not.
It's
It's
nothing.
nothing.
It's nothing. You go to the countries like Indonesia. I recently had some students from there who are doing master and PhD in Islamic finance, and we were discussing one of the class. I said, 30 of you should each run a bank, Islamic one. You have definitely more knowledge than when Sheikh Raji he started his bank. We have all PhDs and master in these things. You should each run a bank. There's 250 millions of you, and only 4% of banking in your country is done through Islamic finance institutions. That's just ridiculous. In Malaysia, where you come from, it's with all, they are the leaders, yet it's only 30%. I don't need to go to other countries. We just, this week, made Sukuk law in Egypt. Can you believe that? You know, because all of these bombardments on the currency, trying to push it down, to crash it, the banks are scared of what's going on, how they're going to deal with these things. Should we take IMF loans? Should we do this? Should we do that? And you know, we don't have even the law to facilitate Islamic finance. Now, alhamdulillah, things are moving, they are changing. I see sometimes some of these Islamic countries, I was recently in one, 100% Muslims. I'll not mention the name, but they called me to see what can we do about some of these Islamic capital markets for a central bank and other things. They started takaful, they started banking, they started things, and they need some other instruments to do certain things. And you go to the central bank, all the sisters wear hijab. Everywhere in society. In fact, on the airport, when you enter the airport, it says, don't bring with yourself idols, you know, for worship. This is against Islam. No alcohol, no. Then you have a riba-based system. Fully, 100%. So this is what we see now. Muslims in Muslim countries and all around the world are awakening, and they say, hang on a minute. You know what? We are Muslims. We actually want Islam to say something about the way we manage our everything. Everything. So you see the calls to say, okay, give us Islamic alternative for what we have around us, because it's a big deal. So we have some estimates that estimate that this will only intensify. And we see that it's growing rapidly. But what we have to make sure is that as it grows, people understand what is Islamic finance, what it is not, and also what it can be. Because we don't want to develop just some sort of mirror of conventional in the body of Islamic. You know, like one friend of mine was telling me the joke. He says, today, you see all of these so-called experts and so on. What they do is, let's say you have a wine, you know, wine. They take grapes, they make a wine, okay? And then they go and say, okay, how can we now take alcohol from this wine and sell it to the Muslims? Okay? So ask, why do you do that? Why do you go in such a complicated process to do something that, you know, at the end to get a juice? Take grapes, make a juice. Why do you go juice grapes, then a wine, then a juice. This doesn't make sense. It's complicated for no reason. But this is what they know. This is what they know. They know how to take it and make it alcohol. They don't know now directly. And we have to learn. So when we develop Islamic finance, we develop it on different characteristics. Okay? So it's working, it's growing, and it is estimated that by some of these rating agencies, it will reach 5 trillion quite soon. Okay? And there is expectation that more and more Muslims will grow. Now, what we need to ask ourselves, how will Muslims who by 2030, according to these projections, will make up 26% of the world, and that is 2.2 billion Muslims by 2030, how will they do their banking? This is what we have to ask ourselves, and all the other things. So we know that from what we see, that they will more and more want Islamic solutions for these things, okay? In our next episode, what we're going to see is 1 out of 5 of the maqasid, of aim of the Sharia, is to preservation of the wealth. So next time we're going to discuss this in a bit more detail. So I hope you can join us next time when we continue this discussion. Assalamu alaikum.